As promised, when it comes to the Bryan Callen Show, I will be doing a book review with none other than the great Ben Askren. Ben Askren, well, besides being one of the most decorated and best wrestlers America's ever known, and being essentially, I think, almost completely undefeated until he ran into Robbie. No, he's undefeated. Yeah, except until he ran into fucking Jorge Masvidal's knee. But he was at the top of the food chain in MMA, and he's just one of those examples of excellence that I had the privilege of getting to know. And then we started talking. I realized he reads as much as I do, maybe more. And I thought, why don't we do something called Books with Ben on the Bryan Callen Show, and we will break down books that people can listen to and to the point where you don't have to read the book. That's what I want to do. I want to get the ideas out of books and into your heads. Let's face it, nobody has time to read a 400-page book, but we'll read them for you. And between Ben and I want to see if we can actually break the book down so that we can get the most important aspects, the most important ideas that the book has to offer into your head. Because remember, a book, a lot of times, is an author's argument for how you should behave in the world. It's an author's argument for how you should do something that you didn't know how to do. And in this case, we're going to break down one of my favorite books called The Talent Code by Dan Coyle. Dan Coyle went all over the world, and he looked at the coaches who put out a disproportionate number of winners. There's one indoor court in Moscow that a woman teaches tennis from, and I think she's put out more female champions than the entire United States combined. There are a couple of schools that take low-income children and marginalized communities, and they take those kids and they put more of those kids in college than almost any other school in the area, even the ones with money. The Brazilian soccer team, they had a certain number of coaches that were able to bring their players up to a world-class level that hasn't really been seen since. So the Dominican Republic baseball revolution, that's a tiny island. Dominican Republic, the whole island, the landmass is Dominican Republic and then Haiti. They're actually together. And if you look at how many people actually come from that island and make it in the major leagues, it's ridiculous. And it's not just physical. It's not just athleticism. They have coaches that somehow have cracked the code. And he wanted to find out who these coaches were. And when I interviewed him a long time ago, he said, I kept meeting the same person over and over again. He has this concept in the book called deep practice. It's where you practice what you're bad at. It's where you practice every day specifically. My buddy Tony Blauer has this great saying. He says, be careful what you practice. You might get really good at the wrong thing. Well, these coaches figured out how to get you really good at the right thing. So you have to learn how to practice under the proper tutelage. Perfect practice makes perfect. Practice itself doesn't. It's not about time. It's about being very specific. And I love that we're going to talk to Ben Askren about this, because Ben Askren is an example of that. Ben Askren, I think, we'll talk to him about this in a bit here, but I don't think he took a day off all through high school and college. I think he wrestled 7 days a week. He just decided he wanted to be the best and that he was going to innovate and come up with things that nobody else had done. And, you know, one of the other things that Dan Coyle talks about in this book is the Myelin Sheath. You actually change your brain when you practice something over and over again. You actually build this neural circuit pathway, or these different pathways that then are surrounded by this fatty tissue. Think of it as like a cable, you know, like a cable that you'd lay underground or something. It's almost the same way with your brain. If you practice the same swing over and over again in baseball or whatever, you practice the same patterns in boxing or in wrestling, you are going to develop literally a different pathways, different neural circuits, so that the information, I guess, is like almost self-programmed. your brain is like anything else. It's a computer that you program. And if you're doing that perfectly, if you're doing that movement perfectly, whatever it might be, you're going to be so much better than your competitors. But you've got to practice what you're bad at. You got to practice. You got to be willing to look stupid. And if you have a coach and an environment that allows you to do that, then that's what you do. The other thing the coaches did is they created an environment where people who were trying to be great were exposed to greatness. They either knew people who were great, who looked like them. You know, they talk about in South Korea, the first time a South Korean woman won a golf championship, all the little South Korean girls were like, wait a minute, if she can do that and she's not blonde-haired and blue-eyed, maybe I can too. And so when you can conceive of something and you go, maybe this belongs to me too, despite the fact that I'm not tall, blonde-haired, and blue-eyed, well, South Korea put out more female golf champions than any other country at all, which is astonishing. So that's what Dan Coyle, he traveled the world and studied all these different sort of hot pockets of talent. And he wanted to see why all these little pockets of talent were able to put out that kind of championship caliber person. And it had to do with the coaches. It had to do with how the coaches set up their environment. You have to be able to practice what you're bad at, not be afraid to look dumb for a while until you master it. You have to be able to conceive of what's possible, that it also belongs to you, that it's not about talent. Sometimes it's about the way you practice. It's about the environment you come up in. It's about the tutelage you have. So this is a very inspiring book, man, because what it means, guys, what it means is that excellence can belong to you too. It can. You've just got to orchestrate your fucking life. You know what I mean, Dylan? Dylan's like a very athletic guy, but he's not working out. And I was like, start by moving heavy shit. Just start there. Well, I don't know how to. That's my impression of him. Meanwhile, no, just get good tutelage. I don't care if it's on YouTube. I don't care if it's a trainer, and I don't care what it is. Just surround yourself or get yourself next to somebody who knows how to produce results. Find the people you admire and then ask them how they got from point A to point excellence. And the Talent Code is a great sort of case study on this phenomenon. So we're going to talk to Ben Askren, who's a walking and living example of this. And I want to find out how he became an Olympic wrestler, how he became an MMA champion. It's just unbelievable.
Yeah, and it's really encouraging for me, too, because he has a flabby body, too, but he's
got a dad bod.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about that.
Yeah, okay.
Ben's not a guy who you look at as a physical specimen at all.
Yeah.
His brother is. His brother was an NCAA champ. And that's the other thing that Dan Coyle talks about in the book, is the fact that a lot of times, you know, people who come from families that have been incredibly supportive and strategic about creating a champion under their own roof. So, again, what I got from this book was that if you practice the right way, if you practice deeply, correctly, you will change your brain, okay? You'll literally change the structure of your brain, and that excellence and being amazing at something can belong to you even though you didn't think you could. I never thought I could be a comic on the level I'm at right now. I never thought that. I've had, over the past 20 years, especially 15 years, when I've been doing what I do to a room, which is frankly, you know, like I say I'm crushing a room for an hour. It's still a mystery to me. I'm still like, how the hell, I don't remember writing this shit. I didn't even know this belonged to me. I didn't know that I could do this. It's incredibly satisfying. And part of what drove me was the fear, was the fact that I just didn't think I could do it. You know, I was desperate to see if I could. I'm still trying to prove it to myself. Well, I mean, you know, I just shot my special, Man Tears, on YouTube. And now I've got to come up with something else. Now I got to, you know, figure out a way to do it again. It's not easy, man. You know, it never gets easy, but what changes is the fact that I know I can do it because I've done it before. That's an important concept. But don't discredit the fact that when you're starting out something, if you're young, the wonder, the fear, the excitement of what if this also belongs to me? What if I can write a song that people listen to and sing along to? Holy shit. What if I can write a joke people laugh at? What if I can awe people with my expression, whether that's painting or writing or singing, whatever? What if I can come up with a business plan that turns into a huge company, a profitable company? What if I can come up with an idea and build a company around that idea and make money? What? Other people have done it. How'd they do it? Let me see. That belongs to you. Does that make sense? Because it's always like one of the things that success, money, and sort of quote unquote arriving, one of the trappings of that is that you lose your hunger. You lose the enthusiasm and excitement to try it again. That's why comfort is the fucking wolf at the door. It's not struggle. You should remain uncomfortable because there's something so beautiful about that. And everybody I know is successful continues to keep that in mind. It's part of why the people I know like Rogan who are so successful work out to the point where they want to die. It doesn't really have to do with vanity. He's not going to be able to use those muscles, but it's a reminder. It's like he stays uncomfortable because it's a reminder that you're still always fighting gravity and that excellence is a mindset and a lifestyle. It's not something you do once. You practice as hard in your fucking garage as you do when you're playing, for 14,000 people. And if you can understand that's kind of, and it's not about time. I hate things like he works hard. I don't like when people say, I work really hard. He's got a work ethic. That sounds like, doesn't sound fun. It's not inspiring. It sounds like punishment. It sounds like you're pushing a wheel up a hill. Getting good at something is not pushing a wheel up a hill. Getting good at something is staying inspired and looking forward to the discovery of practice, to seeing who you can be when you practice really hard at something. That's what it's about. That's what it's about, right? I don't like the expression of, discipline, hard work, focus, concentration. All those things sound like punishment. I like the idea of, let me see what I can discover in myself today. Let me see if I can actually surprise myself, shock myself, scare myself. Let me see if there's, I know that there's the best version of myself over there somewhere. I always say this. The best version of myself is always clearing his throat in the other room. And I ignored him for a long time, and I still ignore him. Because I don't think that belongs to me somehow. Most of us have this problem. We're afraid of our own potential. I don't know why. I mean, I don't know why, but I am. But part of growing up is learning that you can fill those shoes. You can realize who that person is. That's my daily struggle. Waking up and talking to myself the right way is a struggle to this day, and it always has been. Not getting negative, not getting negative, not feeling like I'm, just getting comfortable, right? It's a dumb idea. Because, man, you can surround yourself with people that ask nothing of you. That's the other thing. That's the other thing that I never think about, or I didn't think about when I was younger. You can surround yourself with people that keep the bar super low for you. And pretty soon you'll start to think that's reality. It's not. The bar's way higher, motherfucker. What am I, Tony Robbins right now? Yeah, I am. But we're going to talk to Ben Askren about the talent code. I want him to break the book down because he's lived the talent code more than I have and more than almost anybody I know. He did it in one of the hardest sports on the planet, wrestling. Wrestling is such a nightmare. And it doesn't come with the glory that football and basketball, hockey, and all these other sports do. You're anonymous, man. When you're a wrestler, nobody comes to The girls aren't shouting for you in the stands. You're kind of there with family members and people who like wrestling, which is almost nobody. I don't care how good you are. They wanted to get rid of wrestling in the Olympics a couple years back. What's that tell you? What's that tell you? But they keep fucking speed walking and curling. This is the problem with our world. This is the problem with our country, our world. That you wanted to get rid of wrestling. You want to get rid of wrestling, one of the original Olympic sports, and you wanted to keep fucking luge, curling, and speed walking.
Shuttlecock.
Yeah. And badminton, probably. I don't even know.
Same thing.
I get nuts. I get fucking nuts. And synchronized swimming. I'm not knocking any of these sports, but what? What? We can get rid of wrestling. The people on that board who decided that are not athletes and they're not real people. I'm convinced they were bots. And they should be put in jail. If they are real people, they should be not put in jail, but put into a re-education camp.
Okay, you're getting a little dictatorial.
Yeah, I know, I'm getting dictatorial.
Do you want to talk to Ben? Is
he ready?
Yeah, I think you're scaring people.
Oh, let's go.
Okay.
I didn't know he was ready. Okay, as promised on the Bryan Callen Show, we have Books with Ben, which is the segment, and Ben Askren, who I've admired forever. You know, I realized that the guy reads as much as I do, as I said. And I was like, Ben, let's do a book review on the podcast. Let's see where it goes. And I think this can live on its own as its own segment. Because, like, and one of the things I think is really important is that most of the people that know books have just read books. You know, you've reached a level of excellence in two of the hardest things on the planet, wrestling and MMA. And now and you've got this amazing family. Like, everything about your life is excellence. And I don't know, man. So for me, I'd way rather break books down with a guy like you that's curious about life, but puts their hands on life. You've got the Askren Academy where you coach wrestling, you coach a lot of young kids to excellence. And I just think that wrestling is one of the greatest metaphors for life. If you can be good at wrestling, I think the rest of life is fucking easy. I really believe that. And so... And the first book we're going to break down is The Talent Code, which I know you've read 1,000 times, which you didn't need to because you basically lived this. And so I want to break the book down with you because you lived the book. You know, the book is about deep practice. I've already explained this before you came on, which was that Dan Coyle looked at the hot pockets of talent and looked at the coaches that produced an inordinate amount, a disproportionate number of champions in comparison to everywhere else. And then he studied why that was. So I'm going to let you take it from there.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of things we do at Askren Wrestling Academy are based off this book. I think I read it first, probably when I was in college. It's hard to remember how far back. But yeah, I think that's it. Exactly. Disproportionate amount of talent compared to the population, right? And this is whether it's South Korea in golf. They have the Russian tennis factory, they have Curacao in baseball. And I think a lot of it comes from that deep practice aspect. And, now I've got the chance to apply that in coaching wrestling. I've got the chance to apply that in my own career, whether it's wrestling or mixed martial arts. And I think this dude, Daniel Coyle, I know you said you got to talk to him. I talked to him a little bit through text. I think he totally nailed it. So, I don't know which part of it you want to talk about first, but I want to talk about I've probably read it 4 or 5 times. I've had kids read it, kind of like do a book report where they're talking about the important aspects. So I am ready to start wherever you are.
Yeah, well, I wanted to talk about, so you I know you told me that when you were in high school, you decided to wrestle 7 days a week. And I want to know, and you also are considered a very innovative wrestler. And you don't, when I look at you, it's not like you were born with Yoel Romero genetics, dude. I'm just saying, Ben, I'm just saying, I've heard people, I guess people have called you the guy with the dad bod. You're a strong dude, but it's not like I look at Ben Askren and go, well, that guy and Yoel Romero should be wrestling. But you were a great wrestler because of your ability to innovate. Like, I don't know how much is that your coaches and how much was this, I don't know who put this drive in you to be that good at wrestling and to take no days off. That's
yeah, I can explain the rest of that's the one I can't explain. I can explain pretty much the rest of it from my aspect, but I don't know why I was so driven from a young age. And it was kind of like, I think maybe in the very, very early years, I was too scared to be driven. But then as I got older, it was like, hey, this is what I'm going to do. And I'm going to go and try to do it. So, to your point, I quit football at age 14. That was the last sport. I'd quit other sports before that because I just wanted to wrestle. And there wasn't any year-round wrestling. And actually, when Max and I founded Askren Wrestling Academy, to our knowledge, we were the only year-round wrestling academy that we knew of. There may have been other ones around the country, but not very many. And our thing was like, if I could have wrestled year-round in a club, I would have. But they just didn't exist, So yeah, I was really driven, and then I kind of to the second part of that question, the innovation and the funk and all that. And this is a lot of, we talk about talent code, talk about Myelin, you talk about the futsal, I think is in chapter 1 or 2. And
yeah, the Myelin Sheath, the idea that you can actually change your brain with practice, where you develop neural pathways, and they're surrounded by this fatty layer of tissue. It's almost like having a cable of information, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, like in futsal, right, the idea is that they develop quicker because they get to touch the ball more often, they practice more. And so that was kind of the thought process behind the scrambling, was like, hey, this basic way of wrestling and the simple way of wrestling isn't working for me. Because, I didn't train with Yoel Romero, but like, say, Tyron Woodley or Michael Chandler, who were two of my teammates, are significantly more athletic in the more common speed, strength, that type of thing, significantly more athletic. And I was having a high level of frustration because it was like, well, I want to win, but I'm not having the amount of success I want to. So how do I freaking figure this out? And so to me, I had to kind of take apart the sport in my mind and try to find the weak spots. And when I think about that, and we talk about the talent code, and this is one of the ones I love to talk about, is the chess game. I don't know if you remember that part, but it's really important. And
the father who had 3 of his daughters and wanted to prove that success. Yeah. That it's not about talent. It's not about talent. The book's argument really is, it isn't about natural talent as we would think about it. It is about the environment you practice in and the way you practice. I think that's what the argument for the book is, right?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So, but with the chess thing, it was that, there was this notion that all chess grandmasters had photographic memories. And this was kind of a widely held belief. And that was why you should never trust science, because science is always going to change. And so this guy came along one time. He said, hey, I want to check this out and make sure this is right. And so he replicates the initial study, which is they put a chessboard with chess pieces on there. They give the guy 5 seconds. They take it away. And then they say, hey, where was the board at? Right. And the grandmasters, they put it back perfectly. Well, then the guy says, well, let me twist this around a little bit. And he just puts the pieces in random places. Okay. Does the same thing, 5 seconds, takes it away. The chess grandmasters actually did worse than average people on this. Right. And so the idea was that they didn't actually have a photographic memory. They weren't memorizing the board. They understood the game so deeply. It was like one thing to them, right? They look at the board and boom, that's what it is. It's not like they have to say all these pieces. They know, they see the game and they know what it is, and then they can put the game back. But when the chess pieces are in random places, they do worse than random people, which is so weird.
Yeah. Yeah. But part of it is because what they're actually looking at is pattern recognition, right? So it's like they are looking at what they've trained their brain to look at is they've seen those setups 1,000 times, and the average chess player has not. So it's like when you have a softball player, if you have Albert Pujols or someone who can hit balls incredibly, and you take you take an underhanded pitch from a softball player, they whiff, they strike out because they're used to seeing the ball differently. And when you take the red off the strings, it's impossible. So right? So much of what you do is like is what you've seen and how you practice. You make those. It's like my buddy Tony Blauer. He had this amazing. I think there was an air marshal, and air marshals can shoot incredibly well. Just bap bap bap, and from anywhere they can group shots. They're just the masters at the pistol. And then Tony had one of the guys, and he goes, "All right, I want you to shoot, but I'm going to hit you at some point. I'm going to stand behind you, and at some point, I'm going to hit you." And the guy goes, "Well, that's not safe." He said, I'm not going to hurt you, but I am going to hit you. And the guy's like, "Well, that's dangerous." He goes, "No, I'm not. I'm going to be behind you. Keep the gun down range, but just know that I'm going to do that at some point in your pattern as you're shooting." The bullets were fucking all over the place because he threw a variable in there that he didn't think about, right? So it's the same shit. It's like if you might be an amazing wrestler. If you've never seen jiu-jitsu before, you're going to get caught in an armbar.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking about this with comedy, and I would love to get your opinion. I'm going to make a kind of analogy here is that, I talk a lot about with my wrestlers is like, a lot of them know a single leg or a double leg. And then say a guy like Jordan Burroughs or Carl Dake also knows a single leg or double leg. And if you were to watch them drill it, they wouldn't be all that different. But the difference is in like the really, really finite stuff, the minutia, the perfect timing, the perfect positioning, the right pressure, that type of stuff. So I was thinking about for comedy, with Talent Code, I've got actually to know a few comedians like yourself. And so I watched you, and then I also watched your special. And, so what you're practicing over and over again is your routine. But I'm guessing that it's not just like, oh, I'm going to tell this joke or that joke. I bet. And this is me guessing, and I'm curious to hear what you say, but I bet there's like small, little, tiny timing things like I need to wait one more second before I say this, or I need to put a little more inflection or a little more enthusiasm or something. And you just keep like tweaking and tweaking. And right, this is a talent code. You're making these every time you're kind of judging yourself and tweaking and getting better and better and better. And then all the time by you do the special, you freaking nail it.
What's fascinating about what you just said is that you couldn't be more correct. You couldn't be more right. And what I love about what you just said is the fact that when you get really good at one thing, like you did with, well, really two things, MMA and wrestling, when you master those things, you understand everything else about life. And like, that's a classic example. And I love what you just said, because that's exactly what it is with comedy. You have a bit, you have a routine. Maybe it's the polar bit, bear bit, whatever it might be. And you keep going over it. And there's a certain economy of words. And there's certain inflection. And there's certain emphasis. And there's certain volume. And all those things are always being tweaked as you're working out the special. And when you get it, you will know. It'll be a perfect song. And I promise you, and I'm not a musician, but I guarantee music is the same way. You are trying to find the perfect harmony, tempo, rhythm, and economy of words in that song. And I mean, I think great fiction is probably the same way. There is a perfect paragraph. There is a perfect economy of words that convey to your reader the maximum emotional impact. When Picasso was painting a painting and trying to capture the expression in this woman's eye, this abstract woman's eye, there was a perfect amount of paint and, whatever it might be, and light. He's trying to capture that is the perfect eye. So it's so interesting that you were able to break down my struggle.
Well, I was thinking with your the joke that you ended our show with it, and then you also ended the special with it. It's I don't know if it's a little bit of joke, a little bit of wisdom. There's a lot of things going on in the one segment, but it's about the poachers and the rhino and the Maasai. And so with that, obviously there probably was some type of that really happened to you. But then it's like when you go to it, you like write it down, and then the first time you tell it, you like totally just rejuggle it around.
Yes.
And then by the time you get to time number 10, you're like, okay, this is pretty good. And then
because somebody said to me, they go, "Did that really happen?" And I said to them, anytime you hear me do stand-up, it's true, regardless of whether it really happened. So it doesn't matter if that's exactly how it went. That's how it went in my mind. And that's what because initially the story was different when I would tell it, but overall that is true. That is what happened. Not exactly, not like I didn't have the Masai slap me, but that did happen in my mind, emotionally. That's way more true than, you know, the actual. That's why I always say that fiction is more true than nonfiction a lot of times. You learn a lot more. You learn a lot more about life in many cases. But going back to the talent code.
Well, that's it. That is to me, like the story they start the book with is the girl who, I don't know, they say she learns like 1 month of material in like 6 minutes, where she's struggling through the song. Like that's, I mean, you know, that they're trying to sum up the book in one story. And that's like, to me, that was going through wrestling moves, you know, or going through your comedy routine. It's like,
yeah, the girl you're talking about, where the girl was practicing. There's that school in the Catskills that puts out all these amazing classical musicians, and she was practicing this impossible series of notes, I think, right, on her horn, on her clarinet, or something. Yeah,
yeah. So I mean, like, you know, I tell my kids you got to be almost unemotional, right? So you start your routine, or for me, I'm struggling with a position, right? And I'm like, well, what about this idea, right? And I throw an idea out there. Maybe it's shit. Maybe it's good, you know? And sometimes the first time you try, you're like, oh, that was dumb. That's not going to work. Maybe the first time you try, like, I freaking got something. But the majority of the time, it's like, well, that was all right. Let me keep trying. And you keep trying. And you're like, well, if I do this a little differently, if I move my head that way, you know? And so you kind of like struggle through this. But I think this is the thing with talent code, the deep practice is that, and it, you know, kind of one of the reasons I love comedy is like, I think I'm kind of addicted to my phone, like most people, but with a stand-up comedian, it is like a dance between two people. I know there's a crowd there, right? But if you get engaged with the comedian, it's like there's that really, really deep practice happening. And a great comedian, I'm sure if a great comedian was distracted by something going on, he would be a shit comedian, right? So you get so engaged into what you're doing, whether it was me learning a wrestling move, trying a wrestling move, whether I think her name was Clarissa, trying to learn the song, whether it's you trying to perfect your comedy routine, but you're so deeply engaged into what you're doing and you're getting obsessive about every little thing. And that's how, you know, something great happens.
Did you ever feel like you had to keep the rest of your life super pure or not distracted? Did you ever feel like if you were fucking around in another aspect of your life where you were lying or just not being truthful to who you were, did that bleed into your mindset as a competitor? Because you seem like you're so focused and so, I don't know, like when I went to your house, like your family, you're really close to your brother. By the way, your brother also an NCAA champ, which is so difficult, I can't even believe. Like, people don't realize what that takes. They don't. It's so incredible to be an NCAA champ that I can't believe it. Forget being an Olympic wrestler like you were. That's insane. I don't think people realize the level of dedication, but another thing that they talk about in the book is the fact that you, sometimes when you come from a family where your brother saw every single day an example of what's possible and an example of excellence in wrestling, it became, so the fact that he was able to conceive of that and that it was within reach every day was probably a huge factor in him getting to where he got to. Because that's the other thing that Coyle touches on, is you have to be able to conceive of it, right?
Yeah, the holy shit effect. And you know what? I don't really know where that would apply in my own life of me seeing that. But yeah, with my brother, I see it at the Wrestling Academy a lot now. You know, like in the beginning, when we started, we didn't really have very many good kids. And the first kid that did something, it was like, everyone's like, oh, wait, how did he get there? You know, now I could do that. But now we see, you know, now we have guys winning junior world titles. We got guys winning NCAA titles. And now the kids know everything is possible, right? So there's literally a lot of kids at our academy dreaming of reaching the very highest levels, where at the beginning that did probably seem impossible. But I want to go back to the first question you kind of posed was like, did it bleed into other areas of my life? And it was like, to me, very early on, that's why I think I was probably kind of living the talent code before I read the talent code. I think I got lucky with a lot of the sports psych aspects of my life. But I was just obsessed. Like all I wanted to think about was wrestling, like probably chasing girls and thinking about wrestling. That was about it. Like I was pretty intelligent at school. Like I didn't really have to put very much effort into I think I had a 3.2 all the way through high school and college. And it was like with really minimal effort because I just didn't care all that much, you know? Yeah. So, but it was just like my mind was constantly thinking of wrestling positions, like obsessing, like, what about this? What about this? What? And my brain was just continually like iterating.
So you were actually creative. It was a creative outlet for you, right? Because you came up with, didn't you come up with moves? Didn't you invent your own moves? Yeah.
So, I mean, so my nickname is Funky because I was the first one to kind of like lead this new era of scrambling. And so there was definitely some creation there, but you know what? A lot of it was just the ability to see, steal, and piece everything together, right? Where one person might have had this thing, one person might have had this thing, one person might have had this thing. And I'm like, wait, all those things go together, right? You do this, then this, and this. And then you start piecing everything together to make it like kind of a systematic, like the way a puzzle goes together, right?
That's how people get smarter, by the way. That we'll break down a book called The Secret of Our Success, which makes that argument. Cultures that have become very advanced were advanced not because of, they were advanced because they were exposed to all different ideas. They came into contact with people from different ilks, different cultures, and they all stole from each other and created. That's what the United States is. So when people talk about cultural appropriation, you were violating that. You were taking, moves from, nowadays kids are learning from the Soviets, from the Russians, from the Turks. I mean, it's YouTube is just where you can learn everything, but keep going.
Now there's so much access back because one of the things that's special when I did it was hard. Finding wrestling footage of people wrestling was like I don't want to say next to impossible, but like it was very, very challenging. And so you really had to maybe see people in person sometimes, like go to a big tournament, you see them do moves, and you're like, oh wait, what about that? And so now the speed at which things are moving in wrestling, and I can't exactly. I'm not as deep into other things like say jiu-jitsu. Or other skill sets, but the speed at which wrestling technique is moving forward is insane because everyone from a really young age now is watching everyone else. And so, and I think this is kind of how life works. And I do actually think my wife actually hates how much I think wrestling is a metaphor for life. Cause we get in an argument. I'm like, well, at the Wrestling Academy, this is how she's like, I don't want to hear about fucking wrestling. But when someone does something and it works, everyone else watches and they say, wow, that was cool. Let me try that. And if it's something that actually works, not just works for them or not just they got lucky, but if it actually works, then the next person tries it and it works for them. And the next person tries it and it works for them. Now there's 5 people doing it. Then everyone's watching those 5 people, and then all of a sudden it spreads like wildfire because, like I said, everyone's watching, and so I think that's how wrestling works is people study it and they see it. And when something works, it actually works. They get to go do it. And that's, you kind of said something earlier about how it's living it versus, and this is where I get mad at some academics and in some fields, you don't actually get to put it into practice. In wrestling, there is no lying. There is no bullshit.
Comedy's the same way. Comedy is the same way. I know how a lot of people feel about politics and the shit and sort of the new cultural movements because I'm communicating with them. I'm watching what makes them groan and what makes them laugh and what keeps them silent. And that's a pretty good practice. It's, I'm doing it to a lot of different communities, but also the only way to get good at wrestling, the only way to get good at comedy is to do it. It's like that was kind of the great thing about the UFC. Is like you were a kung fu master. That's all good. That's all good. Then a guy like Ben Askren double legs the shit out of you and punches you in the face, and all that shit goes out the window. You're like, hold on.
There are so many charlatans, and now you can't really be a charlatan in fighting because someone says, "Oh, that works." You're like, wait, let me see.
Yeah,
let's see. Does it actually work? Is there any comedians that claim to be funny and then they're just not funny at all? I suppose no one would buy them, so there's probably none of those. Huh?
Yeah, I think that social media and the ability to promote yourself has given to some people huge audiences who maybe wouldn't have had those just based on their comedy. because it used to be, it was just how many people can you get to laugh, and nobody had an audience because nobody went to comedy. You just had to rely on the club and their marketing, right? So I think comedy's pretty ruthless that way. It's just a great, see, what I appreciate about a guy like you is that you have always come into contact with objective reality. It's like getting punched in the face. It's about as real as you can get. I mean, you may be really tough, but when you get punched in the face, everything goes out the window, And that's kind of one of those, that was sort of the great sort of metric and what is it, chaperone that was ever present in MMA, or in sports. You're either going to get put on your back and pinned or you're not. And it's going to take all of you, And so I think sometimes when you endeavor in a field, whether it's show business, stand up, wrestling on an Olympic level or whatever, it does require all of you. I don't know about you, but you're so accomplished. But I mean, can you speak on that? Doesn't it? Don't you feel like it's always almost close to impossible to be as good as you got? Didn't it always take all of you?
Yeah, no, I think you nailed it. And actually, in 2010. I retired from wrestling in 2008, and then I started fighting. In 2010, I wanted to go back and wrestle and fight. And I have my book coming out, and I talk about this. It was so dumb. Like, I don't know why I thought I could do it, because I was putting kind of half here, and I thought I could do it. And luckily for me in MMA, my competition level wasn't that good, so I could still smash them. But in wrestling, the guy I lost to at the World Team Trials was a guy I thought, like, I should beat that guy for sure. Like, if I was training full time, I would definitely have won that match or won that tournament. And so, yeah, I think when you split your focuses, and that's honestly, that's one of the hard things about being an adult, is like when you're a high school kid. I tell my kids, when you're a high school kid or college kid, and like, you got no responsibility, you ain't got no kids to feed, you ain't got no wife, you ain't got nothing, like, be selfish as shit. Just like focus on yourself, obsess over something, get really, really good at it, because you're going to grow up at some point. And then, it's like, hey, I'd love to be a great wrestling coach, but I also want to be a great parent.
Yeah. Yeah, man.
I also want to be a great husband. Like, it's a hard balance.
But you also learn a lot about yourself. I think the best way to get to know yourself is to get really good at something. I don't think there's any other way. So let me conclude with the book, which is, do you agree with Dan Coyle's argument, which seems to be it's less about talent and way more about how you practice, the environment you practice in, and the coach you have?
Oh, I mean, I couldn't agree more. Actually, one of my things that I do just to annoy people, and I hope you don't try to fight me on episode 1, is I just say talent doesn't exist. And then I let them get so pissed. And a lot of people get really genuinely upset about it. So no, I mean, I think there's inherent differences, and in most skill sets, like wrestling, for example, my inherent skill set was different than Yoel Romero's, for example, right? We both achieved at a really, really, really high level. And so, when you start saying, well, define talent, what is talent? And, I think maybe as I'm a little faster, but maybe you're a little stronger, or maybe have a little better balance, or, all of these other things, right? Determination, discipline, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so, yeah, the biggest indicator of how successful people are going to be is how much of themselves they put into activity. And then a lot of it is a factor of like, who are you around? Who are your coaches? Who are your peers? Who's helping you get there? And, so yes, I couldn't agree with Coyle more. I think he nailed it. I think he really backed his argument up very strongly. And obviously, I said, we try to steal a lot of things he's talking about.
Yeah. And I think the message of the book is that excellence belongs to you too. And it doesn't belong to that rare few who were born for it. I think one of the great, and I don't know about you, but one of the great surprises of my life continues to be the fact that I'm still able to do it. Like, I'm able to do stand-up. When you came to my show, and you sent me a text. I didn't even know you, but of course I knew who you were, and I admired you. I was very geeked. It was really cool that Ben Askren came to my show and laughed, because part of what I always talk about, and somebody made a video about you. They were like, the reason that people admire Ben Askren is because whether they know it or not, what they're admiring is a guy who put himself through more pain than the average person was willing to become great at something, and continued to do it for a longer period of time. You know, part of success is also maintaining the inspiration to do so, to keep the hunger, to stay uncomfortable. And I think that when I say hunger and being uncomfortable, those sound like punishments, so I don't like using that wording. I think the way it sounds great, but I think what a better way to look at it is that for you, every time you went into wrestle, you were trying to solve a problem. It was a process of discovery. You were like, this isn't working. I got fucking Michael Chandler and Tyron Woodley, these explosive, incredible athletes in terms of speed, but what is my window? I got to find the window. Where's the window in someone's house that they left open a little bit so I can sneak through, right? And so when you go to practice at something, work on what you're bad at, discover what it is you're trying to do. You kind of discover these hidden rooms within your own persona that you didn't know were there. Yeah. So
yeah, I agree. Nailed it.
Yeah, man. Yeah, man. Well, listen, that's what I have to say.
Can I get one more? I'll give you a compliment to end the show. And I think you said this a few times, and I just want to reiterate how true I think it is. Is once you develop that path to success in one thing in life, and I tell my athletes this all the time in wrestling, I'm like, man, I'm coaching all of you. Very few of you are going to make a living out of wrestling, a really small number. But if you can do the things you need to do to be successful at this, there's a high likelihood you can take a lot of those tools, maybe not the exact same ones, but a lot of them, and go make yourself successful at business, or go make yourself successful as a father, or take these tools that you became successful and go put them in practice in something else. So I think being successful is a skill. That is a skill in itself, and you can take that and put that into a lot of other things.
That's awesome, man. That's a beautiful way to sum up the entire book. Talent doesn't exist, according to Ben Askren.
People get so mad.
But the name of this book,
you're going to get hate mail.
I love it, though, because the name of the book could have been called Talent Doesn't Exist. That might be Dan Coyle's argument.
Yeah, I mean, yes, definitely a little bit of it, for sure.
All right, Ben Askren, this has been Booked with Ben. We will do this. We will do this a lot for you guys. Hope you got a lot of the Talent Code by Dan Coyle with the great Ben Askren, reader, athlete, coach, husband, father, man.